Good evening, everyone. My name's Carton Rogers. I'm the Vice Provost and Director of Libraries here at Penn, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 9th, 10th, or 11th annual Lorraine Beitler Collection Distinguished Lecture. We were trying to calculate that before we started today, but this is another in a series of really wonderful lectures that are done under the auspices of the Lorraine Beitler Collection. So again, welcome to the Penn Libraries. We have a wonderful guest speaker tonight, Signe Wilkinson, and her very timely topic, which I think you will all find very interesting. I know I'm really excited about hearing her speak tonight, and I trust you are as well. Before I bring up my good colleague, Lance Donaldson Evans, to formally introduce our speaker, I do want to take this opportunity to say a few words about Lorraine Beitler, about her collection of material on the Dreyfus Affair, and the truly dedicated members of the Beitler Collection Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, Lorraine is not able to be with us tonight, so I'm going to be saying all kinds of really nice things about her, and she won't be here to, please do convey all of my good wishes and thoughts to her. 14 or so years ago, when I became Director of Libraries here at Penn, one of the first tasks I undertook was to try and figure out where the Penn Library stood vis-a-vis the Beitler Collection, which had been given to the libraries a couple of years earlier. Finding myself engaged with Lorraine, who is a total force of nature, with Marge Dugan providing the kind of support that only a true friend can, and with the extended family of Dreyfus scholars and Beitler adherents, was one of the most satisfying experiences of those early days as library director. We've come a long way together. I'm very proud of where we are today with our stewardship of the collection and our relationship with Lorraine and the committee. And I have to say that I've treasured every moment of our association over the years. So with that said, you can imagine it's hard for me to view all of this dispassionately. But if you're able to take a step back, and I try sometimes to do that, and look in at this whole relationship from the outside, you do see something quite extraordinary. First, you have this marvelous, energetic, indomitable, accomplished woman, Lorraine Beitler, who has made it her mission not only to ensure that this dark stain in our collective history would never be forgotten, but also to use it as a way of warning future generations about the grave consequences of prejudice and bigotry. Her collection is extraordinary, but her reason for collecting is even more so. Secondly, you have this really supportive team in place with the members of the Beitler Collection Advisory Committee. These are folks who don't get paid for their service. They give of their time, they give of their expertise, and as we like to say in the fundraising business, they're often asked to give of their treasure as well, which they do willingly. They're all about making sure that the Beitler Collection gets the kind of care and feeding that a collection this strong, this valuable, this important needs and deserves. So we only have one committee, and thank you for being here with us tonight. The work that you guys do is just extraordinary, and Lance's leadership over this group has just been wonderful over the years. Finally, I want to acknowledge the efforts of the incredible staff of the Penn Library's Kislak Center in support of the Beitler Collection. David McKnight, Lynn Farrington, John Pollock, Dennis Mullen, Andrea Gottschalk, just to name a few. You guys have all done really, really well over the years with the collection, and I can't be more appreciative of all of your efforts. A special shout out to the Lorraine Beitler Undergraduate Research Fellows who have contributed so much over the last 2 years to our work with the Beitler Collection, especially on the Dreyfus-related lesson plan project that we have underway. So if any of the fellows are here tonight, many thanks to you as well. And a final word, if I may. I'm on an extended goodbye tour. This is the last of the 9th, 10th, or 11th annual lectures that I'll be hosting. So I'm done on June 30th. So forgive me for looking backwards and forwards at the same time. That's sort of what's happening to me right now. But I want to emphasize how important a collector in a collection like the Beitler Collection of the Dreyfus Affair is, and in turn, how important it is for research libraries to house these collections. Scholarly resources like Lorraine's, preserved and made freely available and discoverable to the world, are at the core of this library's mission. Any library's mission should be similar to ours. As the noted scholar, writer, and librarian Alberto Manguel wrote in 2015, the injustice and misery of this world are almost impossible at times to bear, and no amount of books or manuscripts will remedy a single instance of deliberately inflicted suffering. Libraries, however, these assemblies of books that we have sheltered since the days of Alexandria, may help us remember who we are and where we are, and the many things that we have done wrong, and the few things that we have got right. So keep faith in research libraries and in the Penn libraries. Continue to support the Beitler Collection. Come out to these lectures. Thanks again for being here tonight. And with that, I will introduce Lance. So
Cotton, don't go too far, because my first item of business, not really business, it's pleasure, is to extend the heartfelt thanks of the Beitler Committee for your wonderful, extraordinary leadership, for your help, for your support. The expression, "he's got your back," has become very cliched, but there's truth in cliches. And I have to say that Cotton has had our back all the way along. He's supported us. The rest of the library staff has been wonderful, but we've always known that Carter was there, ready to step in when help was needed. He's been an extraordinary presence, and we're going to miss you, and we hope you'll come back as a guest to our 11th, 12th, or 13th lecture.
Back, and I definitely will be
as a
back.
token of our appreciation, we have a little something, and Anne can describe it, because this is a...
Well, this has been hand engraved for Carton with our appreciation for your extraordinary support of this collection. One of my great pleasures has been meeting and getting to know you, Carton. You have supported the collection. This is an unusual collection, and Carton and the Penn libraries have supported the vision of the donor who not only collected this amazing Dreyfus collection over decades, but it was her vision that it be not just a scholarly resource, but a community resource. And Carton, your stewardship, I'll get that out, and the support of the Penn libraries has been extraordinary. So we hope that you will remember us, and it is not so much what he has done for others, but what others have done because of him and the power of his example. This is the measure of the man.
And this was said at Alfred Schweitzer, and it
Carton
applies
Logic.
equally well to Carton. And we should perhaps describe that this is not because this has an engraving of one of the postcards from the Dreyfus collection. So,
Which you will recognize as the J'accuse,
absolutely.
which we've used in the collection a lot. So it's very heavy, so I'm going to put it down.
Thank you.
But it does come with its own box. And we did not get it from Nordstrom's, but I do have a Nordstrom's bag.
That I can take it home with.
So you can
Thank
take
you
it
very
home.
much.
no,
What an honor. Thank you very much.
Oh, Carton, thank you. Really. Okay, I'm going to give you your bag.
That's yours, I believe.
Me and Albert Schweitzer.
Yes, Albert Schweitzer. Yes, perfect together, as they used to say. So let me introduce our speaker for the evening, who probably doesn't need much introduction to many of you, but let me start with a very short story. A few decades ago, I won't specify how many, I had the pleasure of moderating what was billed as a conversation between two cartoonists, the great Claire Bretéché from France and the great Signe Wilkinson from the Philadelphia Daily News. Now, occasionally, well-known artists, writers, architects, and yes, even professors, are not good public speakers. This was unfortunately the case at this event. One of the two speakers almost literally froze in front of the audience, and the only answers I was able to elicit from her were yes and no. Not good conversational material, I think you'll agree. Fortunately, the other cartoonist saved the day with her intelligence, her wit, and her insights. And I am delighted to introduce that cartoonist to you today as the 2018 Beitler Collection Distinguished Speaker. Signe Wilkinson was born in Wichita Falls, Texas, but has spent most of her life in the Philadelphia region with a stint on the West Coast. She's the titular editorial cartoonist for the Philadelphia Daily News, as you know, but her cartoons have appeared in many other publications. She's the author of several books of cartoons, including the amusingly titled One Nation Under Surveillance, Cartoon Rants on Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Privacy, or privacy, as some people say. It rhymes better with liberty, I guess. She's received numerous journalism awards and was the first female cartoonist to win a Pulitzer Prize. Her subject today, trumped cartooning in the wind of the Donald Trump presidency, is particularly timely, both because it pertains to our current political climate, but also because it reminds us of the important role political cartoons played during the Dreyfus Affair, many of which, by the way, are accessible on the Van Pelt Library Dreyfus Collection website, and I encourage you to look at this if you haven't already done so. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome Signe Wilkinson this evening, and I can promise you that, unlike the replies of her fellow cartoonist at that previous conversation, her talk will be much, much more than a series of yeses and nos.
No, thank you. Oh, excuse me. Well, it is really a great honor and pleasure to be welcomed to the Beitler Lecture in this magnificent, magnificent library, where I might have studied had I been admitted to Penn. Thank you, Lance Donaldson Evans, for the invitation, for the introduction, which regrettably has no resemblance to the opinions of my readers. One of them, for example, this weekend in Facebook, Marius Plua wrote, "You deserve to be run out of town." So if you all want to change your idea on this lecture thing, feel free. I'm happy to leave. But speaking here is great because it's a whole hour away from Facebook, unless Mr. Marius is in the audience. The University of Pennsylvania was famously imagined by Benjamin Franklin to be a place where, as he wrote in his proposals for the university, quote, "The students may be learnt something of drawing, of imitations of prints." And I do not see, unfortunately, enough of your students drawing, but certainly in this incredible library, you have plenty of prints. Prints I could have copied had I been admitted to Penn. In his proposal, Franklin also wrote that, quote, this is a bit long, but so great. "The good education of youth has been esteemed by wise men of all ages as the surest foundation of the happiness both of private families and of commonwealths, so as might supply the succeeding ages with men qualified to serve the public with honor to themselves and their country. Congratulations, Penn, Donald Trump. You've certainly succeeded on your mission. You are, I'm sure, proud. Of course, had I been here to caricature Donald Trump early in his career, perhaps I could have put him on a more honorable path, had only I been admitted to Penn. Full disclosure, however, it should be noted I never applied to Penn, so you're off the hook. I probably never would have become a cartoonist had I come here. For example, the Subjects and Collections page on your library's website includes amusing topics of study like statistics, German studies, and finance, but it does not include cartoons or humor. I searched the site for the admittedly vague topic cartoons and found a few cartoons including war cartoons, prohibition cartoons, and my favorite, questionable cartoons. Almost every good cartoon is a questionable cartoon. And there is no more questionable area than cartoons about religion, as the Beitler Collection about the Dreyfus Affair vividly and disastrously affirms. Trigger warning, this collection is not a safe space, and it's why it's so important for the library to have it and to share it. I really salute you and Lorraine Beitler, whom I'm sorry I don't get to meet tonight. I might have to go over and invade her space at the Watermark. I have myself done plenty of cartoons about religion that readers have thought were quite questionable, and I'll show some of them later in this talk. But obviously, not having gone to Penn, I had a subpar education. My education took place off campus, way off campus of the university, which did accept me as an affirmative action hire for diversity. It was way out west. It was geographical diversity. At the end of 4 years, with an important BA in English, and without a business degree in Penn, or, like Donald Trump, a rich father, you'll be surprised to know that I did not go directly to New York into real estate speculation. I had no idea what I was going to do. As it turns out, I am an accidental cartoonist. And I became a cartoonist in part because I was a teenage Quaker. It is true that Quakers are not known for their rollicking sense of humor. There are whole aisles of books on Jewish humor. Quakers have a pamphlet, possibly two. However, we do have other traits. And as any of you know, any Quakers know, one of our bedrock, most dearly held testimonies is being cheap. Or, that's all right, you can laugh, I'm a Quaker. Or, as we like to say, careful with money. And it has been one of my guiding principles in life, and it got me where I am today. I never smoked because why pay for lung cancer? My experiments with drugs were very short because the only time I saw someone snort a line of cocaine through a $10 bill, I craved the bill, not the drug. And I never did therapy because why pay when your friends, if they're good friends, will listen to you for free? And I want to thank my friends in the room tonight. I owe you all. At any rate, Quaker thrift allowed me to piece together a number of badly paid part-time jobs when I got out of college. One of the worst was as a stringer for the Westchester Daily Local News, where I covered the stirring events of the time, like school board meetings and township supervisor meetings, and was paid $10 a story. Fortunately, one of my editors was Harvard grad Dave Barry, before he was Dave Barry. And he and a Swarthmore grad gave me excellent creative writing advice, especially when it came to filling out our expense forms. If you do it really creatively, who knew that between Westchester and Kennett Square, it could be 100 miles, maybe more. But I got to see firsthand the building blocks of democracy. And this is where my education, which didn't happen at Penn and didn't happen at my university, really got started. When covering the Pocopson Township supervisors, for example, I had the story of when they lowered the blade on their road mower from 18 to 15 inches. My story. I started, these meetings were so deadly dull, as you can see any government meeting, if you watch C-SPAN, really is. And so I started doodling on the sides, and my doodlings oozed their way into the paper, and as they grew into editorial cartoons. My poli-sci education started when I got a chance to go on a peace mission with a Haverford professor who had the brilliant idea of spending a couple months in Cyprus to bring peace between Greeks and Turks. How hard could it be? 9 months later, war broke out. I was in a village that had a small Turkish contingent that had been moving back in, and I went to see the Turkish Mukhtar when the whole war thing started unrolling, and he was being led out of his little house with his family at gunpoint by the Greek Orthodox members of the community, who were by far the largest number of people. But I didn't realize then, but what I was seeing was ethnic cleansing. They were getting all the Muslims out, and they put them in the local mosque to keep them safe. Also on Cyprus, when war breaks out, previously there'd been no contact through the news media from the outside to the outside world, except an Armenian on a bicycle with a camera on his back. But when the guns start, the skies darken, and in came war correspondents from all over the world who landed at the Nicosia Hilton Hotel, which was the only one open, and where I had to stay a night. And I met this group of world-weary, self-centered, tough guys, all drinking on their newspapers' expense accounts. That was when newspapers had expense accounts. I just thought they were so kind of weird and self-centered, and I just realized I'd found my tribe. They were also really brave and curious, and these are the people who go into war zones and find out what's happening in these dark or mysterious or unknown places in the world, and you just see like a snippet in the newspaper about it or online, and yet we wouldn't know those places existed without them. And journalists are killed every year at an alarming rate, 50 or 60 a year around the world. So that's when I really knew that, started thinking that, well, maybe when I got back, my cartooning and the journalism could go hand in hand. What was lacking was the ability to draw. Again, had not been learnt the drawing from the prints. So I moved into town and took remedial art classes at our many fine art institutions, and eventually enrolled full-time at the Academy of Fine Arts, and supported myself with the start of my science education at the Academy of Natural Sciences, which we called the Academy of Unnaturally Low Salaries. And I'm hoping that's improved, but I'm not sure about it. We have one of the scientists with us tonight. But there I learned words I'd never known, like limnology, and met the woman who pioneered that field, Ruth Patrick, and just this incredible array of people who were, again, curious about the world and went out and found things out about it. And they would restrain me when, at the time, acid rain was the thing we were worried about. We didn't know it was going to be climate change. It was acid rain. And of course, I wanted to go do cartoons about it right away. And they said, you actually have to do research in advance to find out whether what you're drawing about is true or not. Oh, they were awful. I couldn't stand those scientists. They really slow you down. At any rate, they schooled me in the need for deep research before shallow opinion. I slowly got a portfolio together and got my first job in the San Jose Mercury News in California. Just like I hadn't known where Cyprus was, I really didn't know where San Jose was, being the brilliant geography student that I could have been had I been admitted to Penn. But at any rate, San Jose was another great education, because I was leaving an old Philadelphia that was decrepit and ingrown, and all the smart kids were going out to San Jose and elsewhere. They didn't have a strong mayor. They had a weak mayor system and a city manager who, by the way, while I was out there, lost $60 million in the stock market. So the $33 million that Philadelphia just lost, don't worry about it. At any rate, it was a great education to see that other parts of the country were so different and did things so differently. So when I came back to Philadelphia, I had a much fresher view of where I was moving. So that was 1985, and I've been cartooning ever since. And so now I will show you some cartoons, but first I thought I would give you a mini history of cartooning, and it bears a bit on this because I'm going to show quite a few about religion. Actually, it's because I'm at the University of Pennsylvania and feel so inferior and inadequate in my education that I went and I got some really big books, and I'm going to show you pictures out of them. So, what's a cartoon? There has to be an art major in the house. Anyone know where the cartoon started? Well, I can tell you. A cartoon was the first sketch for frescoes. And here's my good buddy Raphael. He and I, pretty much the same thing in the art department. This was a sketch, and if you can see, they're little pinprint prick holes, and they would push red powder through onto the wall, and that would make the lines where they were going to draw the frescoes. So this was 1504 in Italy, but just a little farther north, the father of editorial political cartooning was living. And does anyone have a guess whom that might be? No, farther north than that. Well, I am speaking of Martin Luther. Perhaps not the name that instantly jumped to your mind, but when Luther, 500 years ago, nailed the 95 theses to the door, allegedly, of the Wittenberg church, it's probably true, not true that that's what happened, but it's a great story, and Luther loved a great story. He did not go home and sit by the fire. He went home and started writing like crazy and ginning up the social media of his time, the new printing press, and started printing tracts that he translated from Latin into German. But his other genius is, for those who couldn't even read German, he started using woodcuts by some of the great artists of his day, including Lucas Cranach, the elder who was in the area. And these woodcuts were attacks on the Catholic Church, and particularly the hierarchy in Rome. And they would not be published in a newspaper today. For example, this is called "Against the Papacy in Rome, Founded by the Devil." Just a subtle little caption. And that's the devil pooping out the cardinals and the Pope. And the other devils with the snake heads are feeding the Pope and rocking the Pope. I showed this to a group of cartoonists and editors last fall, and they asked if any of them would run this in their newspapers, and not a hand went up. This one, a slightly funnier one, is, I just fast forwarded, sorry. This is a picture of the Pope on the right holding out a bull about a meeting that Luther objected to. And so the figures on the far left are turning their bare bottoms towards the Pope and farting in his direction. So the caption on this one is, "Do not, Pope, attempt to scare us with your ban, and be not such an angry man, lest we turn to take up the fight by showing you a pretty sight." So this was these were the early political cartoons of the day, and the Catholics did not take it sitting down. This is a woodcut of Hans Brosimer's with, actually, I'm going to skip this one. It's not even funny. This is Luther at his most subtle. There are four figures hanging from the gallows there, and the one on the far right is the Pope and three cardinals, one of whom he had a personal beef with. And not only that, but their tongues are cut out and nailed to the scaffolding. So this is how the Reformation started. Peace and justice breaking out all over the place. At any rate, as I said, the Catholics returned fire. This is a 7 heads of Martin Luther, with him starting out as a good monk on the left and ending up as Barabbas on the far right. And in the middle, he's one of the heads. He's surrounded by hornets. And it's all to show his descent into apostasy and just insanity, really. And this is the barren Lutheran tree with they're just the figures are of devils, of dead people. There's not a leaf on that tree. And this is one that was used by both sides. The Lutherans used it as saying, because it's a monk, it's the devil playing the monk, and others say that it is the monk is actually Luther, so that both sides used it. But at any rate, so this is where cartooning started. Fast forward to the late 1700s in England, we have James Gillray. Oops. Oh, this is funny because Luther, has a reputation of being anti-Semitic. I included this. But, I mean, really, I'm sorry to say this to Jews, but you were an afterthought. He went after the Catholics for most of his career, but at the end, he did. I mean, he has some terrible writings about Jews, and this is a modern one by Slug Signorino on straight dope, which is kind of just desserts for Luther because he's pooping out Hitler, and a lot of people have written about Luther's influence in Germany that eventually ended up in the World War II and the Holocaust. So this is James Gillray in the late 1700s. Again, this is, you don't see images like this around much anymore. But this on your left is King George III. Lovely display, and his wife, Charlotte, the bare-breasted, trying to protect him and these were just sold on the streets of England. And Gillray is one of the great caricaturists and cartoonists of all times. If you see his work, it's just stunning. But I chose this one just to show how sort of shocking the imagery is to our modern tastes. We're generally much more covered up than this. And of course, we get to Benjamin Franklin with the first, really, it's considered the first American cartoon. But soon thereafter, there were other cartoonists like Edward Williams Clay, who came to Philadelphia and did a series called Life in Philadelphia, which just made fun of African Americans in the most stereotypical and awful way. He did a number on Quakers too, but that was just like a little slap on the side. And I think these cartoons and the ones in your Beitler collection and others, I'll show you that they raise the whole question of what imagery contributes to how people think and imagine other people in society. The most famous cartoonist of all, of course, is Thomas Nast, mid-1800s. And his contribution to religious harmony was the American River Ganges, and this is the Catholic immigrants coming ashore and about to attack the way of life of good Americans. But I think this one, because of his he did several cartoons or anti-immigrant cartoons, not just Catholics, but Chinese as well. He's been considered, the state of New Jersey was going to give him a Native Son Award honor posthumously, obviously, in the early 2000s. But they weren't able to do it because of the outcry by Catholics saying that he was so anti-Catholic that he should not be honored. But I think the interesting thing is to think back at the time, and that the people who had come to the United States were Lutherans and other people who had escaped the wars of Europe, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, where 6 million Germans were killed allegedly over the fights over religion. They didn't want religious strife, and they certainly didn't want to have anything that might have been connected with the papacy in Rome. So while we look at it and say, this is pretty mean, and it is pretty mean, I think you have to go back and look at it in historical times. This is fast forward to Pennsylvania in the early 1900s, which played a role in our cartooning history when Governor Pennypacker tried to ban cartoons. He tried to pass the Salis-Grady law that banned any cartoon or caricature or picture portraying, describing, or representing any person, either by distortion, innuendo, or otherwise, in the form or likeness of beast, bird, fish, insect, or other inhuman animal, thereby tending to expose such person to public hatred, contempt, or ridicule. And that was because that's Governor Pennypacker as a parrot up there on the top of that. Well, the Cartoonist, when you say don't do something, what do? You just can depend on this. Here's Pennypacker as a tree, a beer stein, a turnip on the right. And the law was never enforced. Which brings me to one of the high points of my career, which was a cartoon after the state of Pennsylvania declared the mushroom as the state's vegetable. And they were embarrassed a little because it turned out the mushroom isn't a vegetable, it's a fungus among us. So I did this cartoon, the Pennsylvania legislature with the state fungus, the state frog, the state skunk, you name it. It was in there, the state fly. And the head of the Speaker of the House sent me an informal proclamation declaring me the Pennsylvania State Vegetable Substitute. Anyone can win a Pulitzer, only I have that award. So now I will move on to the promised topic of this. I have to say that when Penn, your library contacted me so long ago, it was way last fall, I hadn't yet really discovered the Martin Luther stuff, and I found it so fascinating and interesting that I just became obsessed with it. And it seemed to me it has a lot of resonances with the material in the Beitler collection. But this is what I get as in return for my cartoons. Again, showing that Mr. Evans's introduction was way too generous. That's when people used to send letters, of course. So this is how I get started, the daily idea, and I like reading a big newspaper on paper because big newspapers, especially the national ones, have big ads. And so when I am reading and I get an idea, I can scribble it down, like this one, which I'm just about to show you the finished product, was just a few weeks ago when we were going to have negotiations with North Korea, and this is the final cartoon. Who does your hair? I love them both. They're just deserve each other. I'm very disappointed this negotiation isn't going to come off. Well, it probably will, but that'll be more good fun. This was my first cartoon of Donald Trump in the summer of 2015. Donald Trump at the border. And already, that's when I really started loving his hair. I knew I could work with this man. Well, 2015 is so long ago, you probably don't remember who else was coming to town at the fall of 2015. Well, you're going to find out in just a second, but it happened right as one of the first debates happened. The debate participants will be chosen by their poll numbers. But I have to tell you, I do a cartoon every day. I start in the morning, early, but I start in the morning, and it has to be finished and filed before 5 in the evening. And I am not going to brag here too much, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 caricatures in one cartoon. It's not easy. And I really like them. I think that you could probably, if you looked at them, figure out who those people are. But who remembers who Carly Fiorino or Jeb Bush is anyway? It's so long ago. Well, this is how I learned how to draw them, is I would turn on the TV and watch the debates, and then I would sketch them. And then, thanks to modern technology, I take a cell phone shot of it and tweet it out as they were still on the stage. I mean, it's really fantastic. And it allows me, a different way of getting stuff out, but it also gets me to see the people I'm drawing. And this goes back to Benjamin Franklin and why Penn should make people draw. To draw is to see. You cannot draw something without looking at it. And I had that, the best, one of the great cartoonists, caricaturists in America, he's quite elderly now, is Ed Sorel. And I used to take my work up to him, and he once saw it and burst into tears and said, "So this is what cartooning has come to in the latter part of the 20th century." Again, cartooning not a safe space. But he then showed me what I was doing wrong, suggestions, and he said, if I have to draw carrots, I go look at a bunch of carrots. And with the modern Googling, there's no excuse for artists not to look. But actually drawing is a great way of really taking a look at something. And I remember in my bad university with not much happening in between my ears. What I did remember was at our world civics class, when we were doing the Parthenon or looking at ancient Greece, the professor said, "Okay, you're drawing the Parthenon." Everyone just like, "Oh yeah, right." But you draw the Parthenon, you learn all about the columns, all about proportion, all about why the Greeks are known as the Greeks. They knew how to do it. So at any rate, I would do these drawings. And I'm going to let you just sort of pass around books. I have just lots of sketchbooks. And some of these are this one is from the Democratic National Convention, some of the drawings there. And this one has the cartoon that I'm just about to show you, one of my first sketches of Donald Trump. Again, looking at him on TV, I suddenly realized he's a Cheeto. I'd never really seen that his cheeks were bright orange and his eyes are white. He was clearly sitting under a suntan table. So, I mean, it's just rough, and as you can see, it's not how I draw him in the final cartoon, but again, drawing is seeing. And this is, back by populist demand, The Apprentice, and that was the cartoon I did after the election, the first cartoon I did of him. Of course, I was in a state of shock because this is the cartoon I thought I was going to draw, A Woman's Place. You remember Hillary Clinton, don't you? Any rate, we've been doing something different now. I have certainly a different name for this talk. But I think Democrats went crazy. Hate has no home here, hate has no home here, hate has no home here. That's what we thought was going to be our response, but in fact, honestly, I hate Donald Trump. The newspapers suddenly realized that there was a whole part of the country they'd never seen before. Hello, we come in peace from Brooklyn to understand the heartland. Let the healing begin. We're still having big debates in journalism on how to cover what is a split, divided country, and a country that, honestly, journalists ignored. We really did, and it's our fault. And I think we're slowly trying to make reparations in that for that mistake. Here's the big parade with the Bone Spur Deferment Battalion in the middle. And the GOP healthcare, which was done all by men, and the coverage. I've done several cartoons about women and being left out of the whole Trump juggernaut. But on this, of course, everyone writes in and says, well, you know, abortion's not the answer. And I say, you're right. Abortion is not the answer to unwanted pregnancy. This is. That went over big. Okay. So this is the cartoon I did the day after the inauguration of the Women's March, and I included it today. We've found our next steps because last night we finally took some of those steps on our way to having women represented in Congress. I cannot tell you how many elections I've been through and how many I've kind of slept through, but when I woke up this morning to read how many women had won, I was really, really thrilled. And so I took out my liberal rag, the Wall Street Journal, which, as I said, I love because it has great big white space. And I drew tomorrow's cartoon, and I will send that around with the first sketch, and you can look tomorrow morning and see how it turned out. But I just thought you'd be interested in for those process geeks. Now you know. This is Harvey Weinstein, Al Franken, Matt Lauer, Bill Cosby, Donald Trump. Who, me? And I do that one because then the next one is, oh, that $130,000. And I included this one in particular because it's just a few weeks ago, but I got a letter from a reader, which again, because of tonight's topic, I think you'll find interesting. I am disturbed by the cartoon that appeared this morning in the Sarasota Herald Tribune showing Stormy grabbing money and Trump with red Jewish stars, one on his cheek, one on his arm, and two on his chest. It has a feeling of latent anti-Semitism, and I doubt that you intended this. If there is there any way you can explain or correct it? Well, that was a first. She was the only person who saw red Jewish stars, but I think it shows just how sensitive people are, and especially about something that they hold very near and dear. For example, the Star of David. And it's one of the pitfalls of of cartooning, because there's so many different sensibilities. I showed it. I mean, many people saw it before it went into the paper, and afterwards, when I shared the letter. And I hope no one here thinks that I drew Jewish stars on Donald Trump's bare chest. But I'm going to show you a couple of cartoons that do use the Jewish star and what happened with them. The first one was a little tiny illustration that went in the 1992 senatorial race of Lynn Yackel against Arlen Specter, in which there was a whispering campaign that Lynn Yackel was anti-Semitic because her Presbyterian church had some speakers, one speaker in a series of, I think, 9 lectures. One was a Palestinian who I don't know who he was, but it was alleged that because her church, of which there are 1,000 members, had hosted him, Lynn Yackel was anti-Semitic. It was a big deal. There was a lot of talk about it and a lot written about it. We wrote a lot about it. And so on the letters page, with a whole bunch of letters about it, I did this little cartoon. Yackel on the left being asked to jump through the Star of David. All hell broke loose over this tiny little cartoon. It was this big. I was accused of being feminism's own Goebbels, that I was anti-Semitic, that this was an outrage, and that you could not use the Star of David in a cartoon. It was just off limits. And this argument I have heard in other religious symbols. I've run into it with using the Christian cross, and certainly I'll get to Mohammed in a minute. But the reason this is such a bogus argument is that it's not the symbol itself. It's how it's whether the symbol is positively or negatively used. And as an example, I will use a cartoon done in the exact same space 2 months earlier that got zero objection. This went with a letter complaining about Palestinians targeting Israelis in the West Bank, probably at the time, maybe Gaza. But it was, obviously in defense of Israel. The little cartoon, and there was no objection, because here the Star of David is being used in a way that supports Israel and supports the Jewish cause. And so my feeling as a cartoonist is that no one can own the symbols. And this became brutally clear with the Danish cartoons of 2005, where riots broke out in Pakistan and over 140 people killed, rioting about these drawings that appeared in a Danish paper halfway around the world. Again, they said, no, you can't use Mohammed. Nobody is allowed to draw Mohammed. But after the controversy happened, I was on a panel at Penn with a Penn professor who showed a number of paintings and drawings with Mohammed in it that were created in the Middle East. Most newspapers were too chicken to use any of these images. I thought it was a dereliction of duty on journalism, but I was proud to say the Inquirer did. They ran it inside. They did the lower left one, the most controversial one. And with a little explanation, the paper was picketed. There were many outraged people. They came in, they wrote op-eds, and it was the start of a conversation about Islam in Philadelphia. And from it, a great multi-faith coalition has developed that is really, and Jews are like the leaders in trying to bridge the divide between religions. So to me, controversial cartoons can be the start of a conversation, not the end of one. This was the cartoon I did about it, the Big Fat Book of Offensive Religious Cartoons. And that's Muhammad, third from the right. And it shows that I got no objections on this, again, because Muhammad is happy. He's jolly. He's got a good sense of humor. And everybody likes to see themselves in that light. It's been around the world many times. It went around again after Charlie Hebdo. Again, I have to respectfully disagree with Muslims who say can't ever draw that. And this is a reminder of our American it's skeptical of religion background. This is a Joseph Keppler cartoon from Puck magazine called The Religious Vanity Fair. And here we have, on the left, we have the stereotypical Jew. We have the little doll Presbyterian that's being herky-jerkied in the middle. On the right, we have a Catholic selling indulgences. We have the Episcopalians. We have the Baptists selling baptism. We have the Mormons with all their wives, and the guy on the red cushion is Henry Ward Beecher, or Henry, yeah, I think that's right. He was the New Age minister of the time, the religion of love, and he's on the hookah there. And Puck, the figure on the lower left, is saying, let me just get over there, make sure I get it right. He's saying, the best route, clean hands and a pure heart. And that is essentially the pragmatic religion of America. If you lead a good life, that is as good as the phoniness of or the excesses of any religion. I'm winding this up, don't worry. This is the top chefs make an omelet. And I'll finish with this. Whenever you're ready, Mr. President. It's the Mueller investigation. And so we have this divided country. We have red states, blue states, and someday we might again have the United States. So thank you very much.
Tour d'horizon of the history of cartoons and the present day cartoons, and I must say that it makes me admire even more Signe Wilkinson, because I think you really stick your neck out and people.
I have a short neck.
So, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have to say most of the cartoonists I know are fairly self-taught because there's so few who really combine all the things that make a cartoonist. But there is a school in Vermont that teaches cartooning. And some of the really good cartoonists that we have with us today have gone to various art schools, but they take the art training and then make it into cartoons. Ann Telness, I recommend her cartoons. Her Donald Trump caricatures are just magnificent. She's at the Washington Post. She was trained by Disney as an animator, so she does some small animations too, which are great. And Matt Davies went to the Savannah School of Art, and he's just a fantastic artist and beautiful conceptions. So there are a lot of really, all the cartoonists are different and they come at different ways, but most have had some art training. But usually it used to be that they would just start on their college art or their college newspapers. There used to be a lot of college cartoonists around. Trudeau, for an example, yeah. Not exactly. On the cartoon that it was right after the Danish cartoons, and of course I wanted to do a cartoon with Muhammad in it. I mean, what else was there to do? But my editor said, this was at the Daily News, this really isn't our issue. So I stewed on it for a couple days, and it took a few days to figure out how I would do it. But when I did this, I was able to do it. Once at the Inquirer, I started, my cartoons started appearing in the Inquirer about 5 years ago after Tony Auth left. And one about the guy, the owner of the building where the wall collapsed on the Salvation Army and 6 people died. I thought that man got off way too easy, and I did a cartoon about him, and the Inquirer wouldn't run it, but the Daily News did, so it got into circulation anyway.
How much flack do you get on a typical day in a cartoon?
Well, I mean, I get nice emails too. Not everyone hates me. But I have regular people who regularly write me and tell me how wrong I am. On Robert Mueller, for example, I get long diatribes about the whole Comey, Mueller, the whole thing, going back, into every minutia. And I say thank you very much. That's very helpful, and I will certainly read every last word of your 5-page email. But and I feel like I have my free speech, and our readers should have their free speech. So I'm glad to listen to them. And there was a letter to the editor today attacking me for a cartoon I did a couple weeks ago, and I'm glad that they're published. I mean, again, there should be the other side.
Any other questions? This isn't really a question, it's just a comment. Pat Oliphant recently gave his archives to the University of Virginia Library, so I would urge you to start thinking about what you want to do with your archive.
We can give you an honorary.
Well, I'm just gonna fast forward here to I had some. If these are all there, that was the, oops. Here, you'll like this one. We're just preparing students for the real world. University of Ideas, I agree with. Twitter, I agree with. Websites, I agree with, et cetera, et cetera. Free speech, that's my big thing. And we're just going to, there's a That's when he was threatening nuclear war. These are da 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 da. Oh, that. Wait a minute, I don't have it in there. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I don't have it. I had a Pat Oliphant for a different presentation. It was called "The Running of the Altar Boys." You can imagine. Had to do with pedophilia. It was actually, the church was called Saint Pedophilias. Any rate, just to show some other, he's just the best. He's quite elderly now and living in the Southwest, but I was surprised about the University of Virginia because we didn't know that he had any particular association there, and I actually emailed the guy who landed it, and I know the Oliphants, and I have been meaning to find out. The best archive of cartoons is at Ohio State. There's the Billy Ireland cartoon collection, and they just have a superb facility. They got a lot of money from Charles Schultz's estate, Peanuts. So, okay, we're losing the audience, so let's wrap it up and eat.